Hey guys, so today we're going to be going through three different ways that I do vocal chops, and then one bonus tip that you can do with vocals as well. So, with no further ado, let's get started. So for our first tip, we're going to just start with the basics and do just a basic vocal chop. So I'm going to bring in an EXS24. So I'm creating a new instrument, and I'm waiting. And I'm going to the sampler. I'm going to open it in stereo in this case. And I'm going to go into edit mode. And I'm going to go to splice. But I mean, you could use your own voice. You could use any sample from anywhere you want. I put Vox note into the search to just relegate it to only like one singular note, because that's what we're doing here. So in this case, that one will work fine. And we pretty much already have the effect that we want here. And I would put this in monophonic, and then I would adjust the glide to taste, and that'll kind of give you where it's sort of dragging between the two notes. From there, you might want to add a little bit of distortion or saturation. I'm going to add here a little bit of little radiator, but any distortion will work for this. I'm gonna turn the heat up, really saturate it quite a bit. And from there, you might want to add a little bit of reverb. So we'll send this to a bus, and we will add some reverb to that bus. In this case, we'll use Valhalla Room. Space Designer would work very nicely. Um, so that is pretty much a very basic vocal chop, and you know that should be more than enough to get you started. And now we will go through a little bit more advanced vocal chops. Okay, so this next vocal chop that we're going to do, for this one, I've actually created a rhythmic loop, so a kind of reggaetonish type thing. So I'm going to play a quick sample of that. Okay, so you get the idea of that. So with this, the trick is that we're looking for a full vocal phrase. So I'm creating a new audio track. So for this, I find that if you have a top liner on the song, it's always great to be able to just use a phrase from the vocal, and you can do this kind of trick with it. In this case, obviously, we didn't have a top liner here, so I'm just going to grab a sample. So this sample comes from Splice again, and what's nice about this is that although this sample is actually at 138 BPM and our song's at 98 BPM, the sample is set to follow the tempo. So when we drag it in, it automatically brings this sample to 98 BPM. If that were not the case, however, then what we would have to do is bring the sample into the tempo of the song before we could do anything else. Okay, so since, like I said, this is already set to 98, which is the tempo of our song, what we're going to do now is chop up the sample. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my scissor tool, and I'm going to hold down Option, and I'm going to cut at the second quarter note. Now when I hold down Option, you see the little plus sign come up in the scissors. What that means is that it will cut it at the same amount for every section. So meaning that since I cut it at the second quarter note, it will cut it again every two quarter notes. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of any of the space that has nothing on it, or just anything that doesn't start at the downbeat. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is create a sampler. So I'm going to go to Software Instrument, create a Software Instrument track, and then I'm going to bring up the EXS24. I'm going to put this in multi-output, and I will explain that later. I'm going to go into Edit mode, and I'm going to highlight all of our samples, and I'm going to drag them into the sampler. It's going to ask me how it would like to build the map, and I'm going to say via contiguous zones in this case because I want it to each sample will go on a separate key starting at C1 and ending wherever, depending on how many samples we have. So it's going to start at C1 and it will end at B2 in this case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one shot off. One shot basically means that you want it to the sample to play all the way, even after you've taken your finger off the key into the end of the sample, where in this case what I want is when I release the key for the sample to stop. Okay, so I'm going to save that. Vocal chop. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this once again to monophonic because I don't want two of these samples to play at the same time. I want, if I hit another sample, for it to cut off the previous one, even if I've accidentally hit two keys at the same time. And I'm going to put the glide up just a little bit. Okay, now what we will do is add a little bit of reverb. This is a to taste sort of thing, so and I'm going to put the little alter boy on this. This is a pitch plugin so that I can change the key of the sample, but again it could just stay in the original key, well, actually that would depend on what key your track is in. In this case we only have drums, so there is not a definable key to the song set currently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this and then I'll show you what this sounds like. Okay, so you get an idea. I'm just randomly hitting keys, and to be completely honest, I'm not sure what sample is going to play when I hit the key, but you see how that works. So you would play around until you have a melody that you really like, and then that would be how you would do that. So now, but I did say I was going to explain why I set this to multi-output. So in this case, what I've done here is when I put the say the pitch plugin on, I wanted it to affect globally all of the samples of that I have in the EXS24. However, I might only want to adjust the pitch of certain samples. So let me show you what I mean by that. So here we'll bring up a mixer. So we have the EXS24, and I'm going to say that slowly because I continuously mess up the name of it. And you can see because it is in multi-output mode, we have this plus and this minus here. So I'll show you what I mean by that. In just stereo mode, we do not have them, but in multi-output, we do. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to open up some buses off of the sampler. Okay. But you'll notice that if I hit the keys, everything is still going straight out the main output. And the reason for that is because I have not routed anything to go out these buses. So, sorry, let me not bring that there because then you won't be able to see it. Let me go into edit again. So here we have the output section for all of these samples. So we can set this to be 3, 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth. Okay, so we have what is it? 8 stereo and another 4 mono or 5 mono. I can't count, but you see what I'm what I'm saying. And so that then will allow these the sample set to these outputs to bypass the main output and go out these. So now once they're going out these separate outputs, it gives you the flexibility to say change the pitch of just this particular sample, or vocal chop, or just that one chop. Also, you could add, say, delay or reverb to only one or two. Give it some emphasis when you hit those ones. Really, the possibilities are limitless. You could add any effects, per chop. So that just gives you a little bit of extra something to think about. And that's pretty much that. So for this one, we're going to grab a new vocal phrase. So let's make a new audio track. And let's grab a new vocal phrase and bring it in. So this one that I've grabbed here is, I've chosen it specifically because it does not automatically follow the tempo of the song. And it is at 124 BPM where our song is at 98 BPM. So I thought it'd be a good way to show you how we would deal with that, because that would work for both this trick and the previous one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the tempo display to 124 BPM, which is the same as what this sample is at. I'm going to take a look at where the sample falls, and then I'm going to set the locator there. I'm then going to bring the track back to 98 BPM, and I'm going to go and I'm going to stretch the audio to where the locator is. Okay, so then what we're going to do is, just to make sure that we are correct, we are going to turn the metronome on and play just the audio track.
Tonight, I wanna get lost in your eyes.
Cool. Okay, so we're going to take and grab this part here because I think that it will work the best for what we're doing. And you can really grab any section of this, but we're going to do this. And we're going to right click on it, export it as an audio file. We want to make sure that we are adding it to the project browser, and then we will name it Run 1. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to mute this track because we don't need it anymore. We're now going to create a new software instrument. We are then going to open up Alchemy. Now you might be asking why we're not using the EXS24. There's a reason for that, and I will go into it. So we're going to go to Advanced. We are going to go to File, and we're going to initialize the preset because we don't want what it's defaulted to. We're then going to go to the sources, and we're going to, instead of having an oscillator, it will be, we'll import an audio file. So that takes us to the drop zone, and we are going to then take the chop that we just made, and we're going to drag it into the drop zone, and then we're going to hit import. Okay, we're then going to set the number of voices to 1, so it is essentially monophonic, and we are going to turn the glide up a little bit, but again, that is to taste, and that gives us, also before we do anything else, let's add a little bit of saturation. We'll turn the analog noise off, and a little bit of reverb. And of course, Alchemy does have effects built into it. I'm just using these ones. And that gives us this. Okay, so now I will go into why I used Alchemy for this particular thing rather than the EXS24. And that is because the EXS24 deals with pitch via speeding up the sample, meaning that the higher the pitch of the sample, the faster it will make it, And of course, what it will do is take it out of the key of your, out of the tempo of your song. Alchemy, however, whether the pitch is high or low,
in your eye.
it does not change the speed of the sample. Okay, so okay, so you can see essentially what that effect would be. Okay, and that is pretty much that effect. Of course, because you are using alchemy, you also can use the envelopes and the LFOs and all the effects within alchemy to affect the sample and get very creative with it, the same way that you could in the EXS24. But that is a whole other video in and of itself. So that's pretty much that. Okay, so we have time for one more quick tip. This is not an actual vocal chop, but it does involve using the vocal, so I figured that it'd be a fun thing to include in here. So for this, what we're going to do is bring up Serum. So I do apologize, as everything else that we've done here has been samplers that are native to Logic, whereas this is something that you would have to own or have the rent to own. So we're going to go to Menu. We're going to initialize the preset, and then we're going to grab a vocal and we're going to drag it into the oscillator section. And what's going to happen here is that Serum is going to interpret this vocal as a wavetable, and it has different import algorithms as to how it would interpret this vocal as a wavetable. I can't stress enough that someone with a more comprehensive understanding of this would be better equipped to explain this. It's a very complicated process, but for the sake of this video, I think that that will suffice. So we'll use that import algorithm. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the display. Now, although I use that import algorithm, typically what I would do is I would scan through, see if I like the way that it is interpreted the audio, and if I feel like I'd like to hear a different algorithm, I'll try some of the other ones out. But for the sake of making this kind of short and sweet here, we're going to go with this one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit a note, and then I'm going to scan through the wavetable position here to see what sounds interesting. So you can really hear that it still retains a lot of the original vocal, although it is very distorted and mangled and everything, but it is now, as I've mentioned a number of times, being interpreted as a wavetable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an envelope really quickly, and I'm going to route that envelope to the wavetable position. So this way it automatically scans through a certain section of it when I hit the key. I think that's interesting. So let's bring that down like 2 octaves. And from there, you really can mess with any of the other effects, the filters, the different effects section, you know, any of the LFOs, and you can get all sorts of different things. Instead of having the envelope scan through, you could have an LFO scanning, you know, over and over again. You know, of course, endless possibilities as with all things. But what also is nice about this is that because your synth sound is being derived from this wavetable that is, you know, very unique, you know that you are the only person that has this sound. You could create a wavetable from your own voice. You could create a wavetable from you know, different instruments like a guitar, rhythmic instruments, and get all sorts of new possibilities. So now I've left you guys a few tips and tricks, and as always, I would love if you left me a few tips and tricks of things that you're doing with your vocal chops in the comments below. And if you like this video, please feel free to like and subscribe, and we'll see each other very soon.